Think you know the whole story? Turns out you were probably taught the half-truth. Welcome to Half-Truths. Think back to a dusty classroom, sunlight streaming through the windows, a film projector whirring in the back. Or maybe it was a Saturday morning cartoon, the colors bright and exaggerated. The image is iconic, almost mythic. A vast, windswept tundra, and across it, a river of fur. Thousands upon thousands of tiny creatures, little brown and white rodents marching as one. They move with an unsettling purpose, driven by a force they cannot understand or resist. Their destination, the edge of a cliff overlooking a churning, icy sea. One by one, then in a great, tumbling wave, they plunge over the edge. It's a cascade of bodies, a willing sacrifice to the cold, unforgiving water below. This, we were told, is the mystery of the lemming, a creature hardwired for self-destruction, an animal that solves its overpopulation problem with ritualistic mass suicide. It's a chilling and unforgettable piece of the natural world's grand and sometimes cruel pageant. It's the kind of story that sticks with you, a perfect bite-sized parable about the dangers of blind instinct and following the crowd. It has become so ingrained in our culture that the very word lemming is now shorthand for a person who unthinkingly joins a mass movement headed for a disastrous outcome. It's a powerful story. It's a memorable story. And almost every single element of it is a lie. What if I told you that this defining image of nature's brutal logic wasn't captured by a patient documentarian, but was instead orchestrated by a film crew? That the lemmings didn't jump, but were pushed. Today, we're pulling on the thread of one of the most enduring half-truths in the entire animal kingdom, the strange, sad tale of the suicidal lemming. The story we all think we know is not just a misunderstanding. It's a deliberate deception born from the magic of Hollywood that has distorted our view of this creature for over half a century. Let's first build the myth as it stands, the story that has echoed through classrooms and pop culture for generations. It's a tale that feels ancient, primal. It begins in the vast, remote landscapes of the Arctic tundra. Here, in this world of sweeping winds and frozen earth, lives the lemming. For years, their population remains stable, a quiet presence in a harsh land. But then, something shifts. The seasons align, predators are scarce, and food is abundant. The lemming population explodes. The quiet tundra is suddenly teeming with life, a frantic, squeaking carpet of rodents. Soon, the land can no longer support them. Resources dwindle, and a strange madness seems to take hold. A biological switch is flipped. The lemmings, compelled by an ancient, unwritten law, begin to move. This isn't a gentle migration, it's a death march. They pour across the landscape, a single-minded torrent of fur, devouring everything in their path. They are not fleeing from anything, nor are they searching for a new home. They are marching toward a predetermined fate. Their compass points only to the sea. The climax of this story is the part we all remember. The leaders of the pack reach the precipice of a high cliff. They don't hesitate. They leap into the void, into the freezing waters below. Those behind them follow, a relentless, unstoppable flood of bodies. They aren't pushed by the crowd. Each one makes its own willing plunge. It is, as the story goes, nature's grim solution to a problem of its own making. An act of species-level self-sacrifice to ensure that at least some lemmings, the ones who stayed behind, will survive. This narrative is incredibly compelling because it serves as such a perfect metaphor. It's a story about the individual versus the collective, about instinct overwhelming reason. The image of lemmings blindly following each other off a cliff is a powerful warning against mob mentality and thoughtless conformity. We see it referenced everywhere. In the classic 1991 video game, Lemmings, the entire objective is to save mindless, green-haired creatures from walking off ledges or into traps. Countless political cartoons have depicted voters or rival parties as lemmings marching toward a cliff. It's a go-to insult. Don't be a lemming. The myth works so well because it feels like it should be true. Nature is full of bizarre and brutal behaviors that defy easy explanation. We see salmon fight their way upstream to spawn and die. We see praying mantis females devour their mates. In that context, the idea of a rodent species committing mass suicide to regulate its population doesn't feel entirely out of place. It taps into our fascination with the mysteries of the natural world, the idea that there are forces and instincts at play far beyond our human comprehension. It's a simple, dramatic, and emotionally resonant story. And it's that simplicity that should be our first clue that we're not getting the whole picture. Nature is rarely so straightforward, and evolution is rarely so theatrical. The first loose thread in this tapestry of myth is a simple question of logic. From a purely evolutionary standpoint, does mass suicide make any sense? Think about it. Natural selection is the process by which traits that enhance survival and reproduction become more common over generations. A gene for, let's call it, cliff diving, would be the very definition of a disadvantageous trait. The individuals carrying this gene would, by definition, remove themselves from the gene pool before they could pass it on. Any lemmings that lacked this suicidal urge would stay behind, survive, and reproduce. Over time, natural selection should aggressively weed out any instinct for self-destruction. So, if it doesn't make biological sense, where did this incredibly specific and vivid image of a lemming death plunge come from? We can trace the popularization of this myth and its most iconic imagery back to a single, hugely influential source. The year is 1958. The studio is Walt Disney. The film is a nature documentary called White Wilderness, part of the studio's acclaimed True Life Adventures series. This series was wildly popular, winning numerous Academy Awards and shaping how an entire generation perceived the natural world. These weren't just films. They were cinematic events, presented as factual, educational, and breathtaking windows into the wild. White Wilderness won the Oscar for Best Documentary Feature, and it contains the scene that would forever define the lemming in the public imagination. The film's narrator, his voice filled with grave authority, sets the stage. He speaks of a mass compulsion and a life-and-death struggle. The camera shows hordes of lemmings swarming across the landscape. Then comes the unforgettable climax. We see dozens of them crowded at the edge of a rocky cliff. The music swells with dramatic tension, and then they begin to plummet one after another into the churning water below, which the film identifies as the Arctic Ocean. The narrator solemnly concludes that this is their journey to the sea, which is their last resting place. It is one of the most famous sequences in the history of nature documentaries, and it was a complete and utter fraud. An investigation years later, most notably by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's show, The Fifth Estate, in a 1982 documentary called Cruel Camera, revealed the shocking extent of the fabrication. The first lie was the location. The sequence was filmed in Alberta, Canada, a landlocked province hundreds of miles from the Arctic Ocean. The body of water the lemmings were plunging into wasn't the sea at all. It was the Bow River. The second lie was that the species of lemming featured in the film doesn't even live in Alberta, nor is it known for the massive migratory swarms depicted. The film crew couldn't find enough lemmings to create their epic scene, so what did they do? According to locals interviewed for the investigation, the Disney crew paid their children 25 cents for each lemming they could catch. The filmmakers then transported their purchased cast of dozens of lemmings to the cliffside location overlooking the river. But the final deception is the most damning. The lemmings, of course, had no natural instinct to jump off the cliff. They were terrified. To get the shots they needed, the filmmakers created the illusion of a migratory horde by placing the lemmings on a large, snow-covered turntable that was angled and spun to make them run toward the edge. Then, to create the dramatic plunge, the film crew simply pushed them over. They physically shoved the animals off the cliff into the river below. The iconic image of the suicidal lemming, the one that won an Academy Award and educated millions, was not a documentation of a natural phenomenon. It was a scene of manufactured animal cruelty, staged for the camera to tell a better, more dramatic story. The true-life adventure was a fiction. So, if lemmings aren't suicidal, what is the real story? As is so often the case, the truth is more complex and, in its own way, more fascinating than the myth. Let's start with the basics. Lemmings are small rodents, related to voles and muskrats, that live in and near the Arctic. They are generally solitary, not social animals. They don't form herds or packs. The idea of them marching in a coordinated line is pure fantasy. The core of the myth does, however, spring from a real biological phenomenon, the lemmings' dramatic population cycle. About every 3 to 4 years, conditions align perfectly for a population boom. A mild winter might allow for better survival and breeding, or a temporary decline in predators like snowy owls, stoats, and Arctic foxes might give them a reprieve. In these boom years, the lemming population can skyrocket. The tundra, once sparsely populated, can become home to hundreds of lemmings per acre. This is where the trouble starts. Suddenly, there is immense pressure on resources. The lemmings consume the available vegetation, grasses, mosses, and sedges, at an incredible rate. The area simply cannot sustain such a high density of animals. This triggers not a suicide march, but a dispersal. Driven by stress and a desperate search for food and space, the lemmings begin to move out from their overpopulated home range. This is not an orderly, single-file migration. It's a frantic, chaotic, and individualistic scramble for survival. Each lemming is on its own, looking for a new territory where it can live. During these mass dispersals, huge numbers of lemmings are on the move simultaneously. They are stressed, they are hungry, and they are pushing into unfamiliar territory. This is when the accidents happen. A lemming's eyesight is not particularly good, and they are not great swimmers. When a dispersing lemming encounters a body of water, like a river or a lake, it sees it as an obstacle to be crossed. To get to the food and space on the other side, they aren't trying to drown themselves. They are trying to get to a better place. Some will successfully swim across. Many will not. They can be swept away by strong currents or simply become exhausted and drown. Similarly, if a lemming, in its frantic rush, comes to the edge of a steep riverbank or a cliff, it might not be able to stop in time, or it may misjudge the drop. It might get jostled by other lemmings who are also scrambling in the same area. They can and do fall. What a casual observer might see is a number of lemmings falling from a height or drowning in water, and misinterpret this tragic accident as a deliberate act. This is likely the origin of the older Scandinavian folktales that mention lemmings falling from the sky like rain, a myth that probably arose from seeing these sudden, massive population dispersals. But it was Disney's White Wilderness that took this kernel of truth. the population booms and the accidental deaths during dispersal, and twisted it into the deliberate, dramatic, and utterly false narrative of mass suicide. The filmmakers took the chaotic reality of a population under stress and reframed it as a neat, tidy, and thrilling story with a clear beginning, middle, and end. They didn't just document nature. They imposed a human narrative onto it. The reality is that lemmings are tenacious survivors. They are tough little creatures adapted to one of the harshest environments on Earth. They have no death wish. Like every other living organism, their primary instinct is to live, to eat, and to reproduce. The story of the lemming isn't a story of self-destruction. It's a story of population dynamics, of the brutal but logical consequences of boom and bust cycles in an ecosystem. The deaths that occur are not a sacrifice for the greater good. They are the unfortunate but natural outcome of a desperate search for a better life. So, we have journeyed from the familiar, dramatic image of a furry creature leaping from a cliff to the uncomfortable reality of a staged scene of animals being pushed to their deaths for the sake of a good story. Debunking the myth of the suicidal lemming does more than just correct a small fact about a small rodent. It serves as a powerful case study in how easily misinformation can take root, especially when it's wrapped in a compelling and authoritative package. An Oscar-winning Disney documentary called True Life Adventures sounds like the absolute pinnacle of trustworthy information. Yet it was the primary vehicle for spreading a complete falsehood, one that has lasted for more than 60 years. It demonstrates our own vulnerability to a good narrative. The idea of a pre-programmed death march is dramatic and mysterious. The reality of population pressure and accidental drownings is, well, a bit more complex and a lot less cinematic. We often prefer the story that is simple and memorable over the one that is nuanced and true. And the metaphor is just so useful. The image of lemmings marching off a cliff perfectly captures the idea of blind conformity. It's a sticky idea that we are reluctant to give up because it so effectively illustrates a human folly we all recognize. But in using it, we perpetuate a slander against an innocent animal. The lemming isn't a conformist. It's a desperate individualist, scrambling for its own survival. The real lemmings are the ones who accepted the Disney story without question, following a narrative off a cliff of misinformation simply because the source seemed trustworthy. Correcting this half-truth matters because it forces us to be more critical consumers of information, even from sources we trust. It reminds us that documentary footage can be manipulated, that narratives can be constructed, and that the truth is often messier than the stories we are told. The tale of the lemming is not a cautionary tale about the madness of crowds in the animal kingdom. It is a cautionary tale about the power of human storytelling and how a single, well-told lie can forever change our perception of reality. The most dangerous cliff isn't the one in the Arctic. It's the one that separates a convenient myth from a more complicated and often more enlightening truth. Now you know the real story. What other half-truths are still out there? If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, and join us next time. Until then, stay curious.